Yeah.
often what I see is finance isn't brought in early enough. They don't know how the product works, and they're judging the organization based on numbers that actually don't reflect what is actually happening on the production floor. And so I find it tremendously useful to have the finance team, especially accounting and cost accounting, doing shop walks.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Due to how companies function in the startup phase and evolve, most of them operate in silos because it's hard to find cross-functional talent. In addition, the cross-functional processes are perceived to be slow. It's also tough to train people in multiple disciplines. As a result, most SMBs will have one person responsible for each function. For example, sales, purchasing, AR, AP, HR, etc. While this siloed nature may help you sail through the startup phase, it's the cross-functional alignment that will help propel your growth. In today's episode, we have our guest, Pam Fox Rollin, who discusses how to drive cross-functional clarity in a siloed organization. She describes the entire process of driving this clarity, including setting the shared promise and how it differs from a shared vision. Finally, we discussed several stories of executives who may be afraid of driving this clarity in fear of disruption to their organization. Let me introduce Pam to you. Pam Fox Rollin coaches and consults with leaders, especially in healthcare, software, manufacturing, and professional services. Drawing on extensive experience with public and private companies, fast growth startups, public agencies, and NGOs, Pam is known as a valuable thought partner to leaders who are creating change across complex organizations. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Pam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sam. I really enjoy your podcast.
Okay, amazing. And I'm super excited to have you as well, just because the kind of experience you have, especially around the team management and bringing that cross-functional clarity, it's so critical for our audience. Just to kick things off, do you want to start off with your personal story and your current focus, Pam?
Sure. I grew up in corporate strategy consulting with Bain and Accenture, before and after MBA, got to see a lot of different kinds of companies, a lot of different industries, and really recognize some very common change challenges across organizations. I like to be wherever there is strategy meeting operational capability and change meeting individual capability and change. So 21 years ago, I founded IdeaShape, and 4 years ago, co-founded Altus Growth Partners to build capacity in organizations to really transform both on an operational capacity and an individual leader capacity and team capacity so they stay agile, because the days are gone of optimizing operational models. As I see it, it's about agility.
Okay, amazing. So I think this is going to be really interesting in overall how anybody can transform their operational capacity. And this is going to be so critical, especially for the growing business. So my listeners are definitely going to appreciate your background. We have one of the standard questions before we jump onto your story and the insights that you are going to share. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth, Pam.
Yeah. So to me, business growth is at all of those levels, right? We want the overall business to grow. And often that's where they focus is let's grow the bottom line of the business or the top line of the business, whatever phase they're in at that time. But to do that, are we also focusing outward on growing the industry? Are we also focusing outward on growing our connections with partnerships? And then inward, are we focusing on growing the capacity of our leadership team, of our cross-functional teams, and of individual participants and leaders?
Okay, amazing perspective there. So let's dig deeper into this perspective, especially when we look at the siloed organization versus slightly more centralized organization. If you look at the state of manufacturing, 90% of the manufacturing businesses are going to be small to medium-sized businesses. And these are very siloed, the way they think, the way they work. Right. So they are going to have, let's say, their accounting department, which is going to be completely separate. Their manufacturing shop floor is going to be completely siloed. And then there is going to be a leader, and leader is typically bouncing back and forth between these departments. And obviously, there is a lot of admin overhead overall. So when we look at this cross-functional perspective, I think that is completely missing, especially when we look at the small to medium-sized manufacturing business. So Pam, let's say if you were to be hired as a consultant in these business, how would you design the cross-functional structure in the organization?
Yeah. First, I'd start with what is the shared promise, Sam?
Okay.
Because if we don't have a shared promise, then why would we even begin to coordinate across silos? And I find that strengthening the shared promise. Are you part of this promise to whatever it is? We want to expand into a new territory. We want to add product complexity. We want to be able to add technology to the shop floor or to how we run the organization. Why would anybody do all that work and coordinate across the organization if we're not driving towards the same goal?
Okay, amazing. So if I am trying to understand from the executive perspective, all of these things sound fancy when we look at shared promise, and you did provide some example of that. Do you have any specific story that you might be able to share where you were able to bring this cross-functional clarity? Do you want to share that?
Yeah. So, and this is a memorable one for me because I was 21. And as my mom said, how can you be a consultant? You don't know anything. You're 21. Yeah. But when we join big firms, we get put into situations where we're consulting. And I had a plant that I was working with, and this plant produced very delicate machinery that handled semiconductor wafers.
Okay.
And it was growing through acquisition, through acquiring these tiny pieces of the technology puzzle, these garage shops of how to handle wafers. And each piece that they acquired had its own complicated technology. And it required many disciplines, Sam, to understand what this was about. You needed chemists, you needed physicists, you needed machine engineers, all of that. But they weren't working together. And there were hilarious, I mean, costly, hilarious with the addition of time, but hilarious problems where some disciplines had the wafers going vertically and some had them going sideways and some had them going, and they were all testing them in different ways and doing them in different ways. I was there to help bid out some of the key components, but you can't even do that if there's engineering change orders every week as they discover that they're not handling the wafers in the same way. So it turned out that the challenge that I learned to work with at 21 was to pull people together and call out the problem, what we sometimes call declare the breakdown. Say, hey, here's what I'm noticing. Doesn't look like this is going to get you where you want. Let's talk about what we want and figure out how to get it together.
Okay. So in this specific example, when I look at it, obviously the amazing story, by the way, because there are going to be some fragmented pieces here. And obviously, if you don't have that shared vision and also the cross-functional clarity, overall, I think you are going to have a lot of inefficiencies in the organization, and it's going to be very hard to either provide the customer service, the kind of customer service that you are willing to provide, or just operate as an organization. So I like the story. But let's say if we look at from my audience perspective or the listener's perspective, they are thinking that, you know what, I am SMB manufacturing shop. I don't necessarily acquire as many businesses. but I do have similar challenges where the challenges are
Yes,
going to be related to different departments, because each of these departments might not have, let's say, the complex skill sets the way that you describe, that you require a physicist or the chemist in terms of understanding those complex pieces. But at the same time, I am going to require the other skill sets, which is going to be engineering, which is going to be understanding, how the shop floor works. Even
totally.
inside the four walls, we are going to run into far more challenges. So let's say if you were to translate this insight into my situation, which is just one side, I'm not necessarily acquiring any more business. Where are the areas that you are seeing where the cross-functional clarity is going to be really important? And what kind of shared vision can I set in my organization?
Yeah. So to be sure, those people were in the room. The machinists
Okay.
were in the room. The audit.
Okay.
And so we were talking not with the people who were acquired. The funny thing about that was that the people whose technology were acquired left. Like they got payouts and they left. And they left the internal people, the machinists, the purchasing team, the accounting teams, just needing to coordinate, and that hadn't been their experience before. I want to give a particular shout out to finance, and you do the check if that's relevant, Sam.
Yeah.
Often what I see is finance isn't brought in early enough. They don't know how the product works. They
Yeah.
don't know what the production cycle is for it. And so they're judging the organization based on numbers that actually don't reflect what is actually happening on the production floor. And so I find it tremendously useful to have the finance team, and here I mean especially accounting and cost accounting, doing shop walks,
Yeah.
involved in problem solving. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, fairly similar experience. In fact, I mean, see, I'm actually going to build your story with another story, and that happened this morning, to be honest. Okay. So I am a guest on a lot of different podcasts, to be honest. Okay. So I was a guest and I was talking to a job shop owner who grew his business to $50 million. Okay. So this is the prime example of a manufacturing story that grew. And now the comment that I got from the owner, and I was actually trying to convince him that, you know what, the more cross-functional clarity you have in the organization, the better organization you are going to have, the easier it is going to be to grow. But the comment this guy made is, you know what? I don't like accounting. I don't like the way GLs work, because, when I am utilizing QuickBooks, which is completely cornered and siloed, then I don't have to worry about the accounting. Accounting is not something that I understand. Now, if this comes from a leader of the
Oh, yeah.
organization, so now I'm going to ask you this, Pam. Let's say if you were talking to this leader and if you were coaching on the cross functional, would you agree with his approach that, you know what, accounting needs to be completely separate? The rest of the organization is going to be completely separate.
Oh my God, completely not. So I would say to that leader, well, what do you look for from accounting? What do
Right.
they give you that matters? And then say, how informed do you want that to be? Do you want that to match what's going on in the shop floor? Do you want that to be the most relevant that it can be? And of course, the answer is yes. So then how do we inform that? How do we make that match? So, and usually that doesn't mean taking your engineers to the accounting department, although sometimes it's good for them to understand the pressures that accounting is under and the strictures under which they operate. But mostly it means bringing accounting to the engineers into the shop floor.
Yeah. So let me build on this story. He had a counter, and which is a fair counter, and that's why I want to get your perspective on this story as far as the overall cross-functional clarity is concerned. So in this story, let's say if you have the accounting, now typically what your shop floor guys or the people who are actually working on some sort of system, it could be ERP system, they don't like any accounting related errors or problems, just because then they need to understand how accounting works. So they want to think of this as more of the manufacturing problem. So in this particular case, they were using some sort of backend accounting system. All of the admin stuff related to accounting was happening in the corner in a very siloed fashion, and they had the, let's say, the half a day batch that they were doing to reconcile these two systems. So the challenge that you are going to run into is both of these systems are not going to be talking to each other. the way you would like them in the real time. If you had the real time insight, then you can make far more informed business decisions. So now, when you look at the cross functional clarity, Pam, and I'm asking you, what are going to be some of those decisions that this business owner is going to miss just because these systems are not integrated in the real time?
Sure. The one I see most often is related to product and product
Okay.
complexity. And to go back to what I was talking about, that need for agility.
Yeah.
And if you say, my market isn't changing, I just want to produce more of the same widgets for the same market, great. But generally, that's not
Yeah.
what I'm hearing these days, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you're going to build for agility, then you need to be able to understand what changes when different aspects of your product change. And that go all the way from how the orders are received to what are the components and how things are sourced. Because as we all know, sourcing is totally thrown up in the air these days.
Yeah.
And also how they move through the plant, with what technology, with what skills of what people, and then our package. That's a huge issue these days in many industries,
Yeah.
is how do you package and ship? And so making sure that everyone has a comprehensive picture of what goes on and then comes together and has the conversation when you want change. Because often I see leadership teams saying, yeah, we're going to change this in the product. We're going to add this complexity. The product leader says, let's do this. And they have no idea what chaos will ensue. And it doesn't mean don't make product changes. It means you need to build clarity. You need to build trust. And the key thing that you need from leaders at all levels is the capacity to have conversations without freaking out
Yeah.
about what will likely go wrong, what has gone wrong, how do we improve it, and to have those conversations with moods of curiosity instead of looking for who to blame.
Okay, so I am actually going to touch the story again from a different perspective. So here, the way
Okay.
you are describing the agility and the product changes, obviously that will require a lot of planning in the organization. So the other comment I got during this interview is the majority of the machine shop owners or the manufacturing owners, they don't necessarily like planning. Okay, so the way their planning works is, okay, I have a job order. Here's my job order. Okay, what are the materials that I need to source? Okay, pick up the phone, call the vendors. Okay, here is my job going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. So now in this process, obviously there is not much of the planning involved. Now the way you described, overall from the agility perspective, overall from the sourcing perspective, obviously that will require a little bit of framework. That will require a little bit of planning, right?
Yes.
So if you were to, let's say, talk to this owner and convince him why planning is important for cross-functional clarity, can you tell us why planning is important?
Yes, because otherwise there is a heck of a lot of waste.
Okay.
And if you're not clear, if you haven't done some planning, people sit around wondering, I don't know what's going to change. I've heard there's going to be a new product. I'm not going to work on improving this aspect of our process because it'll probably change next week. And that's true. It might change next week. But have you been in a conversation about it so you can say clearly, this here is not changing. Please move forward on it. This here is changing. And to do that, you need somebody. And I know not every brain loves planning. Not
Yeah.
every function is focused on planning. But I think a lot of what's wrong with planning, as I see it done, and especially smaller organizations and bigger organizations have their own challenges, but is they have this horrible bad mood around planning that is very well justified because the plan then becomes the shared document nobody looks at. And really, the plan is in the heads of the people who are walking out of the room. And so if you're good at planning, or you have people at any level who are good at planning, have them communicate it, have people kick the tires and check it and all of that so that the information is in their head and not just on a report that they print out every so often.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't know if you are not able to plan how you will be able to explore the opportunities for controlling your waste, to be lean, to be agile. Oh my goodness, there are going to be so many different problems just because, in my mind, when you don't have a plan, you don't necessarily have a framework. So, Pam, again, going back to the question, let's say if you are working with this owner, right, and you are trying to create a cross functional framework, and you did mention that you have to have some sort of shared vision. So in this particular case, let's say the shared vision is going to be,
What
yeah,
I said was a shared promise, and that's a little different from a shared vision.
okay,
A shared vision is, can be very North Star. It can also
okay,
be what is our vision for our industry, all of that. And sometimes that's exciting to the people at all levels, and sometimes it's not. But you can't operate without a shared promise. And a shared promise is we will be creating a parallel line while keeping up the quality of our flagship line. We're going to be creating a parallel line with this different material that
okay.
serves these needs. And we're going to make sure our customers are able to do X, Y, Z. And I
Okay.
think that's critical that people from all functions are bought off on.
Okay, give us an example of the shared vision as well so that the listeners are able to differentiate into those two because I am still trying to follow that. I don't know if I follow
Okay.
through. Do you have an example of the shared vision as well?
Yeah, sure. So, medical devices company that I
Okay.
worked with.
Yeah.
So they had a vision
Okay.
where customers would have a different experience with their device. It's easier to manage. It's an implantable. So it's got
Okay.
all sorts of clean room manufacturing, all sorts of stuff because it goes in the human body. And they had a vision where that experience would be easier for the patient, easier to recover from because of their device constructed. That's the vision. But their shared promise for that particular period of time would be that it would come in a range of sizes so that it could suit the variety of the ages and body sizes of the patients who got it. Because they knew how to do it in one size, but their shared promise for that year was to
Yeah.
learn how to produce in a variety of sizes. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. So now let's dig deeper into this shared promise. So let's say, number one, I would like to know what are some of the bad forms of the shared promise that you have seen, because obviously you have a lot of specifics in that shared promise, and that's what you need to have if you really want to execute on that, right? So, number
Yeah.
one, what are some of the attributes that anyone should be looking at in a good shared promise? And once you have that, how can we take that to the next level so that we are able to deliver on that within time, within the expectations?
Yeah. Let's focus first on that first word, shared.
Okay.
Um, Often it is not a shared promise. It is
Okay.
a pronouncement from the
Okay.
CEO or from the head of product, the head of manufacturing or whatever. We're going to have this. And no, like shared doesn't mean I received it. Shared
Yeah.
means I have a commitment to it, that it's my promise too, and I'm upholding my part of that. And we need that from everyone, from the
Okay.
first level clean room tech to the people in regulatory and accounting and all of that kind of stuff. The second is on the promise part. Like, what is it? Is it clear enough? Will we know when we have it? Yes, we're going to have it in 3 sizes by the end of this year. And it will be ready to be, in this case, approved as a medical device. The biggest challenge that we ran into, beyond that the promise was never really shared, that people were not invited to commit to it, is that it didn't change anything. For a shared promise to be actually running the organization, everybody needs to adapt their plans to align to that promise. And I find that often they don't.
I'm actually going to give you one more story related to this shared promise overall. So I am actually talking
Right.
to one of the executives, and this is his current challenge. Okay. So he has a shared promise. He has a real challenge that he is facing at this point of time. What he wants to do is he wants to get into aerospace. Aerospace is a very different industry from the manufacturing perspective. Okay, because that
Yes.
requires a lot more compliance. You need controlled processes.
Yep.
Otherwise, you'll not be able to sell it to them. Okay, that's how the industry works. So now this is a very traditional organization. They have been building a bunch of parts in the manufacturing organization. So right now their biggest challenge is retaining talent. As you know, manufacturing is really struggling with the talent at this point of time.
Yeah, everyone is struggling with talent right now. It is crazy. But yes, manufacturing as well.
Yeah, so in this specific story, so they have half of the guys who have been there for roughly 20 years, half of the guys who are slightly newer. Now, this person is trying to bring the change, which is going to be some sort of system that is going to provide them the quality control, financial control that they are looking for to meet the expectation of the aerospace customer. Now, he is trying to promote the vision that, you know what, I am trying to do this. I have my shared promise. This is my goal. I want to do it by this time. But he is struggling to communicate this change. And the reason why he is struggling to communicate this change is because half of the people who have been there for 20 years, they don't want any change whatsoever. Okay?
Yeah.
They don't care. And this guy has been trying to push to them, but he fears that if he tries to push too much, then what is going to happen is these guys are going to leave. The new guys actually want the change. So let's say if you were coaching this executive for
Yep.
overall the cross-functional clarity, making sure that his goals are going to be met. So what are some of the concrete steps that you are going to take in this specific case so that they can meet their goals and the shared promise?
Yeah. So it was interesting. You said, I have my shared promise. If it's not we, we're some. And my encouragement would be to talk to the different groups separately.
Okay.
Not that you have to have this meeting is only for 20-year folks, but this meeting is only for new folks. But that generally that you hear the concerns in a way that they get to, to really, you do a listening session or multiple listening sessions
Yeah.
with small groups
Yeah.
and understand what their concern about is with the change. There's a lot of experienced manufacturing folks who are concerned that the change will mean they'll be out of jobs in terms of technology, or that their
Yeah.
jobs will be reduced to to not respect their knowledge that they've built up so far.
Yeah.
And he needs to build a bridge for them to be able, but first he needs to understand their concerns and then build a bridge for them to say, here is what's on the other side of this. Here
Okay.
is what it looks like. Here's what you'll be experiencing. And if you don't want that, and then fine, maybe you would be happier someplace else. But here's what I see is in here for you in what you'll be able to do with the tremendous experience base you have.
Okay, so let's give this story a little bit more color. So let's say that,
Okay.
the challenge that they are running into is really the fear. Because if you are, I don't know, have been in the industry for 20, 30 years and you have been doing things certain way, and when you try to change that, obviously there is a lot of fear involved. It could be the job loss, the way that you mentioned. And even though the executive is trying to promote their own vision and the shared promise, but somehow these guys are not really buying that. And they are not really buying because they are thinking from their perspective that maybe the executive saying that the grass is going to be greener, but I don't know. Maybe from my previous experience, that wasn't the case because maybe he's trying to
Yes.
promote. So what would you do in that case?
I would go really back to not just the grass is greener, but here's what the grass looks like. And
Okay.
here's why we need you running the powered lawnmower. Here's like that you really build it out, because leaders often, their heads have been in the change. They're living 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years ahead of where the rest of the team is. And they think it's clear, and it's not at all clear what it will look like on the other side. So really build that picture of what they will experience, or design it together, within these parameters. Where is how you see you fit in? I think there's a lot that can be done with co-design, obviously within the parameters that fit the business. The other thing I'd say, and you mentioned, and this is so common, people have had bad experiences with change. And what I always say is low trust, slow change.
Yeah.
So before this leader even attempts to sell people on the change, I would do a little trustworthiness audit. Like, I'm not debating whether this person is a quote good person, but are they doing the routines
Yeah.
that build trust? They do what they say they will do. They keep confidentialities that are supposed to be confidential. And other than that, they share information, that they are open to feedback and to being presented with new ideas and possibilities, they need to be trustworthy to be a credible bearer of change, or else people are going to go exactly into that hole that you showed us.
Okay, so let's bring some more colors to this story. So let's say if I'm the executive and I am trying to sell my guys that grass is really greener on the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
But as an executive, honestly speaking, let's say if I'm running a family business, I don't even know how the grass is going to look on the other side. So I am trying to sell something that I am not even sure what I am selling at this point of time. Even though
Well,
I
that
have a
doesn't
problem.
sound. I'm sorry, Sam. I was just laughing. That doesn't sound very trustworthy, does it? Would you buy from a salesperson who doesn't know what their product will be?
Right, exactly. So how would you fix that? I mean, I have a problem. I know that I have a problem. I am trying to do something. I do have a problem, but I don't know how to sell this. And that is probably the problem most manufacturing executives face because they are not really good salespeople. Good salespeople are super good at communication. They understand how to communicate their ideas. Right?
Totally. The shared promise is like, do we want in aerospace, do we want to be able to create this, whatever it is, module or whatever component that they're providing that will provide these superior capabilities so that the space station can be whatever, or so that we can have these privately funded blah, blah, blah. Like whatever it is they're committed to, one, get that. Then say, to do that, we're going to need this, and this. Now, within that, and when I say this, and this, I mean a cost profile. I mean certain capabilities. It's going to have to be able to do this. It's going to have to be able to, we're going to be able to have to, as an organization, have to speed up our processes because the cycles on those kind of products are faster than we've experienced before. Once you have those parameters, then you're in a space of co-design. So instead of saying, your job will exactly look like this, you say, let's design it together within that. What could we do? And they get to experience you actually valuing their input, valuing their expertise, which is so critical for the 20% plus people. There will always be a few people who say, I don't want to be involved. That's management's job. That's not my job. Fine. Let the 60% of people who do want to be involved design it with you. It will be a much better design than had you as president said, I don't know what you'll be doing, but it'll be great. Or for you and a consultant who doesn't work in the company to design it by yourselves. No, invite everybody in, whatever consulting support you have, the leadership, the shop floor, the engineers, and let's design this future process together. Let's design the roles that we need to build this process.
Okay, so just to be clear in what you are describing, so let's say my 50% of the organization is completely divided overall, whether they want to co-design with me or not. Some people are on board, they definitely want to have their voice. So are you recommending that I design with those 50% people and leave the other 50% at this point of time and maybe try to persuade them later on and bring their feedback later on? Or shall I not simply worry about them at all?
They'll persuade themselves once they start seeing what their colleagues are designing. My experience has been they'll jump in at some point. What I would be super thoughtful about is making sure everybody is bought in on the parameters, because we're not going to be designing wild things that wouldn't work, right? Keep everybody focused on it needs to look like this when it comes off our shop floor. It needs to meet these criteria. It needs to have these sort of turn cycles. It needs to, okay, within that, how could we reorganize ourselves to deliver it? And then to the point we were talking about earlier, let's bring in accounting early. Let's bring in HR early. Let's bring in whoever is going to need to be involved in this process so that they're involved in the design, because somebody who does cost accounting is going to look at this and say, oh, I would need to totally change up how we do this. Good point. And they're going to start working on it.
Yep. Amazing. So that's it for today, Pam. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or advice?
Yeah, it is to do it with people instead of two people and build that clarity together. And what I don't mean is some kumbaya consensus process. What I mean is here is the parameters of what we commit to do. Here's what it's going to take. Now, where are we unclear? What do we need from each other cross-functionally that is different than what we had before? It's really to have those conversations instead of thinking that each department by itself is going to optimize for the whole. How does that sound, Sam?
It does sound very good. In fact, I am actually going to build on that. So, my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be that number one, if you are trying to communicate something, you need to feel in your heart. If you are not feeling in your heart, then you are not going to come across as authentic as your team is going to like to see in you when you are trying to communicate a vision. And if you have never done this before, make sure that you cross check with an expert who's really good at bringing change or communicating ideas, and bring those people early, co-design, co-develop, and co-transform. On that note, Pam, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, Sam, and I love what you just said.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Pam, head over to altusgrowth.com. It's altusgrowth.com, or connect with her on LinkedIn. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Laura Goodrich, who discusses how and where to begin the journey of change. Also, the interview with Amanda Prochaska, who discusses why a continuous monitoring of emotional response is critical for the success of large transformation projects. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.